Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar of today. Hope everyone's gathered here equally as excited to join us. Before we get started, allow me to first introduce myself. I'm Jeremy, and I'm your host for today. Just to make sure that we're on the same page, we'll be sharing on Google Analytics 4 and how we're going to give you tips on how to migrate your user analytics to GA4. All right. Our exclusive webinar today is in collaboration with Persuasion Technologies. We're here to bring you top tier tips before Google Analytics 4 makes a debut here. As many of you are aware by now, Universal Analytics will be shelved soon. So to get you prepared for this change, this webinar will treat you with everyone to understand the real reasons behind uh, the need to make needful changes and the tips before GA4 was finally here next year. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our special guest speaker for today who will lead us. He is the Director of Persuasion Technologies, Mr. Chu Zuming. Welcome. Zuming, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. So maybe let me just share my screen. So give me a sec. So can you see my screen? I think I am already on the screen. Yes, Jeremy. So
Can see your
can you
screen.
hear me? Can you hear me? Can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So I think thank you for the introduction. So my name is Zooming and I run Persuasion Technologies. So I think today in collaboration with with the folks at Trinity, I think this is a topic that I think a lot of marketers are going through at the moment, and so I think that the objective of this presentation is just really give you a maybe a little bit of a sort of overview of what the things you may need to do for your own initiatives for marketing, or you have a series of sites, how you should go about doing it, and perhaps look at getting your team involved or your agency involved as well, right? So let me just start with a little bit of what we do for a living. So Persuasion is actually a Google Analytics services company, and we also do a lot of Google Cloud. We essentially build a lot of, I guess, a lot of implementations that help marketers derive um, opportunities and findings from the data. So across not just Google Analytics, but across um, their data stack in terms of from media campaigns all the way to customer data, right? So anyway, so we also do a fair bit of a Google Cloud. So we also a Google Cloud partner and a Google Build partner in Southeast Asia. So we are actually also in three teams in Singapore, Malaysia, uh, Philippines, Jakarta, and also in Bangkok. But anyway, I won't talk too much about this, but like let me just move on to the areas that I guess we'll be covering today. So Google Analytics, obviously we use it as a data source for us to track our campaigns, right? And it helps you solve, I guess, as a marketer, kind of three areas, and one is what works, what doesn't work in terms of the activities that you do. So what I call media analytics. So um, where your channels coming from and all that what activities you do, whether you're using emails and all those campaign activities across your mobile app and also your website. So Google Analytics also tracks your website. And then there is also the part where customer data comes in. Although Google Analytics doesn't really track um, specific PII, sort of personal identifiable information, you're able to very often use IDs to kind of hook them into your customer data, and that's usually the next thing you can do with, especially with Google Analytics 4, and that's why I think there's an area I will cover very quickly later on in the presentation, and one of the reasons why you should get excited about GA4 rather than think that it's a bit of a pain right now to go through. But the infrastructure is very tuned towards moving companies to a lot heavier usage of data. So in moving to the cloud and using big data and all that stuff, it's actually a very good tool to migrate people over to those sort of level of sophistication, right? So that's the other angle around as a marketer, how GA4 is very, very beneficial to us. And then from there, obviously, you can activate all the data into campaigns. So naturally, Google Analytics has integration to AdWords and all that stuff. But obviously, if you're going to put it into the cloud, you can also enable things like with the data from Google Analytics, you can also enable and enrich it for Facebook audience activation, emails, and all those things that you do. So with that sort of introduction around the usage of Google Analytics data and specifically GA4, I would like to then also start with this topic of why are we here where why is there a need for us to migrate to GA4. So I think that the easiest answer is that we have to. There's no choice, right? Unless you don't want to track anything that uses Google Analytics, and because Google Analytics it is still free. If you want to use Google Analytics, then you have to change that. So if you were using Google Analytics Universal Analytics, which is the old or the current Google Analytics version, that will be deprecated on July the 1st, 2023, you only have less than a year for you to migrate over before it completely stops tracking. That means the tracking beacon will not send any data to the Google Analytics service anymore. And so if you go to the Google Analytics, your user interface in the current Universal Analytics, you may not see data on July the 2nd, right? So and so there's these things, a little bit of a rush to get people to start implementing it. I'll come through some of the sort of some of the key areas that maybe some checklists you have to go through in terms of preparing your team to move over. But I think the crux of all this is essentially twofold. One is there's the technical aspects of it. The other one is, which I think is more important, is actually getting people to use it, right? So getting the team to concurrently use and start using your reporting for your digital marketing campaigns. Even your reporting, you should start incorporating your GA4 data in there as much as you can. In fact, I would advise you to not look at the Universal Analytics anymore, apart from just for comparison purposes to see whether it's accurate. And so that way, then management and yourself will get used to the tool, and it does have, in my opinion, it does have better reporting. Obviously, there's this discussion around looks too complicated and doesn't have the same reports as what before. So anyway, in this presentation, I'm not going to go through sort of feature by features. That's not the point. I think it's more about the migration, but I'm just giving you an idea of how you kind of deal with it from a learning standpoint as well. So and how to kind of cope with the features. So from a feature standpoint, there are certain things which are not the same, and you may not get the same metrics sometimes. For example, there is no bounce rate in GA4, right? You have to kind of calculate it on your own, right? Or you have to put a sort of composite metric or calculated metric around it. But generally, don't worry too much about the features. I think Google has already pledged to add in a lot more features in there, and also a lot more features that the old one that will not have, and because the current infrastructure has potentially the plan has a lot of more machine learning things you can do, meaning you can come up with a lot more powerful audiences and attribution over time as well, right? So the good thing is you can unify your mobile and your website traffic a lot easier than before, than the old one. So if you're using mobile with website, it's advisable for you to use the full features of the GA4 sort of cross-device features, and that will help you a lot as well. All right. Again, I'm not going to go through everything here, but that all in all, the highlights of what Google Analytics 4 would have is essentially a few things. Apart from reporting and also new features of machine learning, there's also what I call integration with BigQuery. So BigQuery is actually a platform on the Google Cloud that allows you to take all that data that you have and put it into a cloud where you pay per use, and it's what I call a data warehouse. You can use it to store a lot of your Google Analytics data and also your marketing data. And so moving all your data into the cloud, and you start owning your data and controlling the data, right? So that's a good thing about it. Before this, you still could do it, but you had to go through connectors and things like that. A lot more difficult to do so. Right now, it's a native integration. It helps you a lot moving forward when you start doing a lot more sophisticated analysis for your data, right? Which I can cover a little bit afterwards. So what I'll start with in terms of the migration. So I'll go to migration itself. I think there are key areas that you should look at when we talk about migration of sort of GA4. Is number one is you have to ensure that the Google Analytics tracking that you currently have in your universal analytics, you want to ensure that whatever you're tracking is or the metrics that you're using, or the events, and let's say you have a form fill on your landing page, or you have maybe 10 different forms that you want to track for goals and events, or if you have e-commerce cart, you have multiple website or a single website, you have e-commerce tracking from add to cart to checkout to purchase value. You want to make sure, and you've been relying on it, you want to make sure that those metrics that you have are found in the new GA4 and implemented in a way that's accurate. So continuity of whatever you used to track is very important, right? So that's where the technical aspects around it are involved. I think, let me qualify to say that if your website is not very complicated, like a very simple landing page with a couple of forms and just goals, you don't really have a lot of customization in terms of tracking funnels in a way that requires a lot more complication, then actually you can just put in the code and then set up goals, and very easy to migrate. Anyone helping out with the website, web developer can help you do that. I think complication comes when you have customizations, or you have an e-commerce site that maybe it was built from scratch or had a lot more customization. That's where you may need a little bit more guidance and a lot more technical details to look at. But in general, it's not a very difficult exercise if you have a simple website, right? Simple website. The second thing that you wanna consider when you look at this whole migration is you want to think about how you want to still retrieve your old universal analytics data. So imagine if it's going to be next year and they're going to stop tracking it's very inconvenient for you to go from the old Google Analytics and then compare to the new one, and then there's no continuity around the data. So what we advise customers to do is you can back it up into that feature I talked about, the BigQuery feature. And I can show you a little bit how it looks like. So this is an example of BigQuery. It looks a bit technical, but really all this data here. This is all Google Analytics data that I put it from my website, and we just link it into. So this is updated every day. This GA4 data, and all the events are all tracked back here. So imagine before this, all your data is found from the user interface in Google Analytics like that. Rarely do you really have to kind of put it into an environment like this where you can easily run analysis over if you have the technical capabilities to do so. So this is already comes sort of bolted on into the new GA4, so you can back it up very easily, right? So backing up the old GA data is also possible in that same way. So we suggest people to do that. Having said that, the third thing that you also want to look at is the new GA4. Unfortunately, only keeps 14 months of data retention. So that means historically the universal analytics could, you probably can still see like 5 years of data in there right now. But moving forward, for the free version of Google Analytics at least, it only takes 14 months of data. So that means if you look at it in 2025 or 2026 or something, and you want to do a year-on-year comparison, you may not be able to do so from the UI, right? So again, I suggest you to turn on this feature, and so that every day that data will be in that BigQuery database you have, and you get to keep that data. The good thing is you get to keep this data, right? So you can always look back and do historical analysis around it. So this is the other area that you want to consider when you do the migration and when you want to kind of sync this. You can sync it the day that you implement Google Analytics 4, or you can do it later when you do the migration. It's up to you. The fourth area that I think a lot of customers also would like to take advantage of in this exercise of migration is also really maybe you weren't really looking at GA universal analytics that much anyway, or it wasn't accurate, and so now it's time to reset it or make it better. You may want to update the implementation for better accuracy and things like that. So some people they will use it, say for e-commerce, the back end of the revenues were the back end is 100,000 ringgit, but actually in GA the Google Analytics Universal Analytics is only 70,000 ringgit, you're off by like 30-40%. So some people they take the opportunity to fix this, and so they implement things like server-side tracking, or what I call info. If you all along with the Google Analytics stuff, they also want to implement Facebook pixels changes to conversions APIs, which is really a server-side tracking that makes it a little more accurate for your pixels. So if you're not aware of this, don't worry too much about it. It's really just to help kind of clean up your current digital marketing tracking capabilities for Google and Facebook. You can also use this opportunity to implement new things to make it better, right? So these are the areas these are the opportunities you can go for and things you want to look at. So what I'm going to do next is really just go through. I don't want to make it a little bit too technical for people. I think I'll go through the key areas that as a checklist you may want to look at. So usually sites are usually two kinds, right? Whether you're a lead generation type, or maybe you're a SaaS that sells things like software online, but generally most people are lead generation, have a landing page or have a website that gets leads in and or people engaging with it, and they want to track the content. So that's very, very typical. And then there's the other side, a little bit more complicated, where they have payment capabilities, or whether you're a shopping cart or a travel site, you have payment capabilities. Those are like e-commerce tracking. So I also divide that. Generally, these sort of sites, you still have to go through a checklist of things. Some of them are applicable, some are not, right? So I think few things that you want to start looking at is when you set up, when you want to migrate, you might want to look at how complicated your website is, like I mentioned. So if it's a very simple application, it's sort of putting the code in, and you only have a landing page or two, and you're not really tracking much of the events and etc. Then very, very straightforward to do that, and just talk to your agency or your web developer, and you can do it pretty easily, and just put a code in and run it concurrently, right? So I'll cover a little bit on that. Usually we suggest people to just run those concurrently, so you have your old Universal Analytics and you have your current one, the new GA4 together, so you see side by side and get used to it, right? And also you want to look at if you have many websites, like say across different countries, and again, there is that workload where perhaps, although it's simple, but you have many different sites to go for, then that's where you get a little more complicated, and you may want to kind of have a plan to do it in phases across different sites. So you do one first, and then you kind of do across. Once you have the template, roll it out to different countries. That's what I suggest to do if you have different sites. If you're using something like a WordPress or something like that, then what I mean plugin availabilities, then if you really have to use those, please, right? So if you have the easiest way for you to do that is to just have a plugin, go ahead and do it. Unfortunately, not every platform has the plugin yet. Some of them work very well, some of them are not, and some of them they charge you a fair bit of money. So for example, in e-commerce, like Shopify doesn't have one yet, right? For GA4, they just have the old one, so everyone's waiting for it. They probably come out for e-commerce, but there isn't one, right? So in fact, a lot of customers don't wait. We build our one ourselves. We have our own Shopify web tracking app for our clients who do those who can't wait. But anyway, look at whether there is a need for plugin availability. Of course, plugins don't work sometimes if you already have a lot of customizations. So keep it simple, right? So you have these options, and keep it simple, because then only you can sort of look at more complicated things. So don't worry too much about it being too technical. And when you migrate, the second part is really when you want to kind of keep a log of all the things that you were looking at your report. So the best way to know what you were tracking is if you ever had reporting in the first place, and metrics and all that, and then you're showing senior management every month, use those and make sure those things are are the things that you want to track, and then you want to see whether you can implement the same in the new Google Analytics 4 or not. So if it's very straightforward and it's already in the standard tracking, there isn't that much customization, then you can very easily opt for using plugins and sort of very easy implementations. But if you had a lot of customization, you look at your current reporting. So just look at your own, if you have a dashboard or your Excel sheet or Google Sheets that you do every week or every month with your manager or your senior management, find out how that will change with GA4. I think that's the easiest thing, and whether you how that's going to look in GA4, whether you're able to track that. I think that's the first thing you need to look at, or key things for reporting you need to look at, right? So that also means like certain things sometimes are tied to your GA data. So for example, some customers have dashboards, they have API access where they're linking their GA data to a third-party tool, or they have a Google Sheets and or even linking to simple things like AdWords already. All these are part of the migration exercise that things that are dependent on Google Analytics for you to run your campaigns. You need to make sure that those are in place. So having a checklist like that and putting into a sheet and then say we have this already done will help a lot, right? Okay, this by no means comprehensive. This is just high level areas that you usually want to look at. So for example, things like audiences, your segments, and you already created running for campaigns in GA, and maybe you want to have different reports that you have already put in GA, standard sort of custom reports. You may want to replicate it. Write all those down, right? And see how you can replicate it in GA4. So other areas you want to look at is whether like I said, server side tracking is a little bit more intermediate. But again, if you think that maybe your old Google Analytics 4 you had server side tracking, now maybe you want to make sure that you have the same for GA4 as well. Some people have server side tracking for the universal analytics, or maybe now is the time you want to kind of implement server side tracking if you want to, right? So which makes your things like your e-commerce tracking a little bit more accurate. Number 4, I think I talked about this just now. You want to map your current reports to the new GA4 or your dashboards. Other areas which I think, like I said, not so much technical, I think very, very important as well is getting your team trained in it. Again, the training doesn't have to be, or you need to have a trainer. I mean, certainly you can have training, but like you can always go online. There's plenty of resources around. Even Google and themselves have the training resources for you to learn. But get the team start reporting in it in GA4 already, and so that is actually the training. Using it is actually training, so you get a lot more familiarity with it, and then you won't have this thing. Oh, it's so difficult, it's too complicated. I don't like using it. Well, last thing you want is in like June of 2023, and like you still don't know how to use it, and like you have no choice, then like it's going to be a bit of a mad rush to come up with reporting for people, right? And so with that in mind, I think looking at all these sort of human resource or maybe manage all these things I talked about in the checklist, you may want to set a timing around it, right? And work backwards when you want to do it, and for which sites, for example, and having a bit of a get someone from IT or your allocate some time for your digital marketing efforts to kind of look at this implementation and sort of set maybe like a couple of weeks or a month and just do it all in one go. That's my suggestion to you, if it's a simple one, right? And not wait for too long, because the longer you wait, it's just there's a lot of how should I say, technical debt that builds into it, and then there's a lot of catching up to do. So that's what I would suggest you do. I think questions I will leave it till the end. But generally, I think what we suggest is when you do this, even you migrate, you move all your tags in, or somebody helps you, you may want to kind of just look at the dashboard side by side and do it. So there are all these dashboards around, and I can show you that this is something that you just get from the internet. They have all these different dashboards. You can just compare GA4 and Universal Analytics side by side, and that sort of thing. That these little tools to help you compare. And yeah, get the hang of it. And this is just a simple Google Data Studio dashboard. It will give you an idea. It will be different, right? So the numbers will be. So don't get startled when you see, hey, come on, the numbers are like so different, because the way it tracks is a little bit different. I think the most important thing is you look at the number of conversions and signups, and those shouldn't differ that much. But how they treat sessions or events for that matter, a little bit different, right? So don't get too worried about it. But again, in GA4 they have a lot of new other metrics that would be useful for you as well. So I would be suggest running it side by side like this. Next thing, I think other things that you can do once you do into GA4 is you can start adding in your user IDs and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a sort of snippet of opportunities when you start moving into GA4, and then you maybe want to back up that data into something like this, the BigQuery. Remember, I just mentioned to you just now. So these are some of the good things about the implementation that you can look at when you consider a migration, and opportunities you want to think about later on. So for example, if you put this and add a user ID on, say, from Shopify or something like that, like you can actually integrate all this data, right? You get a 360-degree marketing customer analytics profile of your users from GA4 just here. You can take in Shopify data, you can take in your other Shopee data, for example, and put it in. So like, and then unify it. So an example is you can build a dashboard that has something like that has all this sort of segmentation of customers, how often they buy, who's churning, and who's most frequent customers, and map it to which one is it online or offline, and all that sort of stuff. You can predict whether people are going to buy in the in the next 30 days or something like that. All this stuff happens because you put all that data here, and you can run all those analysis around it. So for example, for us, we just have different connectors, and you just add it on to GA4, and then you have push it all into the database here. And so you have all these different templates that you can put in, and then you can just unify into a dashboard like that, right? So you have all this tracking data from GA all the way to customers. These are the opportunities you can go for, right? And then you can segment, people from Google Analytics from the website and who are married and married with children, because I got the married data from their profiles in the shopping cart, and so I can just segment them, and whatever it is that you want, and then you can kind of send them all over to Facebook or Google or whatever it is. So it becomes very, very powerful, yeah. Taking the GA data and combining it with your customer data, because you have it all into BigQuery, right? Else, before this, most people would just look at just whatever they get here, right? So it opens up a whole dimension around using your data for your own company use, right? So those are the opportunities you can go for. I think I don't go too much in detail, because I think you may have questions, but I think for us, how we kind of dealing with it, because we do this on a day-to-day basis, is the way we do it with folks at Trinity is, obviously when we do it, because we've done it so many times, we automate quite a lot of these, and we can do it a lot faster than someone who's kind of struggling with it. And so we have automated tools to semi-automate the whole migration from e-commerce to from mobile apps. And so we've kind of standardized a lot of the SOPs and all the technical stuff. So we have tools to even just click a couple of buttons, you get all the dimensions, the events all very, very quickly, and then we can just push them all into the template and then just run it with a very short period of time. But yeah, anyway, I think that is really an overview of some of the things you may want to look at when you want to migrate. So I think we can share that, and it's certainly after the call, you can I think some of these things Trinity can share some of it if you need to. But again, you can just refer to this as some idea around what you need to do. So Jeremy, I don't think I have any more questions or anything to cover apart from handing over back to you on and start dealing with the Q&A.
Yep. Thank you, Zumin, for sharing the important views. Yep. Let's move on to the Q&A to answer a few questions. I think there is a question for you.
Already? Okay.
Let me
maybe you can read it out to me.
Read out. All right. From Nairo Granite, do we know if there are any fundamental changes to how sessions are tracked or measured in GA4 versus UA? And are they still measured in 30-minute blocks?
I think, well, I mean, I think the short answer to you is it is different. The way they track the sessions are all different. So it's very event based. So the definition of the session has also changed. And so I think they even have a metric that says from the time the first event is being tracked, right? So the old session used to be really when your page view is first loaded, and it's fired and the hit is fired, right? So nowadays it's completely different, right? So the actual answer is yes, it's completely different. And 30-minute blocks, I think you're talking about the ones where the session is expires and things like that. So certainly at the day sessions are calculated based on when the duration is in terms of the event. So there is like that, when the person exists and stops looking at like the event, and there is a element of time around is it on it as well. So yes, I mean 30-minute, like, yeah, it's no longer the same. It's no longer the same. Does that answer your question? Correct. Yeah.
Yep. Narrow Bennett, hopefully we have answered your question. Okay, I'm looking at. Oh, yeah. Yep, not to worry. I think the audience, if you have any questions that you'd like to clarify after this session, do drop us your questions and we'll address it together with Zooming. But before we end today, thank you, Zooming, for your insightful session. I'm very sure attendees today have gained the best tips and even more impressive insights from you before we welcome GA4 to here to Malaysia. But don't go anywhere just yet. We are offering an exclusive free digital audio report for all of you to ensure that your Google Analytics is going to be migrated the proper way. So just scan this QR code on the screen, and our consultants will reach out to you with solutions on how you can migrate to GA4. I'll leave it here for a while. Yep, I'll just leave it here. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to meeting you in the next one. Thank you, Zooming, so much. Thank you very much, Zooming,
Thank
for
you all.
sharing
Take care.
with us. Yep, we'll keep in touch. All right, take care, everyone. See you. Bye bye.